When Lin Xiaochuan opened his eyes, he seemed to have been knocked hard with a beetle in his brain, buzzing. He blinked and tried to figure out where he was. In front of me was a strange ceiling, with a circle of soft LED lights embedded on the top, emitting warm white light. The touch of the bed is not right, and it is as slippery as the configuration of a high-end hotel, rather than his old second-hand bed. He sat up suddenly, looked around and found that he was in a room that was wide open to the honor. Outside the floor-to-ceiling window, the night view of the city is like a colorful painting, the lights of the high-rise building are flashing, and you can also see a winding river from afar. What, he muttered in a low voice, as if he had just crawled out of the desert. He looked down and saw that his palms were covered with fine beads of sweat, and his heart was so fast that it was about to pop out of his chest. He remembered that his last memory was in the laboratory, when Professor Chen's old face was talking about some quantum smears at him, and then a dazzling blue light flashed, and then, it was gone. He tried to recall and found that there were some inexplicable clips in his brain, like a movie without endings, which was played continuously. He seemed to remember that he was wearing a luxury car and wearing an erect suit, standing at a high-end venue, shaking hands and greetings with others. But he was obviously just a farm that had been working overtime until he vomited blood. His biggest property was the second-hand notebook. Where were the luxury cars and suits? Lin Xiaochuan pinched his face and gasped in pain. Not a dream. He stumbled out of bed, stepped on the icy marble floor and walked to the floor-to-ceiling window. His face was shown on the window, or the familiar face, and it was a bit unfamiliar. The fine lines at the corners of the eyes seemed to be a little less, and the skin was as smooth as if it had been taken care of. He touched his chin and found that the beard was scraped cleanly. This was not his style. He was so busy that he felt like he wasted time when washing his face. Just as he was fogging water, the door of the bedroom was suddenly pushed open. A woman in a silky nightgown walked in with a cup of hot coffee in her hand. She was pretty, with her maroon hair draped over her shoulders, and a gentle look in her eyes, but her eyebrows were slightly slight, as if she was worried about something. Xiaochuan, what's wrong with you? You don't sleep in the middle of the night, why do you feel stupid when you stand here? Her voice was gentle, and she was filled with a slight angriness. Lin Xiaochuan was stunned, and his brain seemed to be struck by lightning. He didn't know this woman at all, but the look she looked at him was so natural, as if they had known each other for a long time, and even had a close eye. He whispered, but didn't know what to say, so he could only say, who are you? The woman's expression froze instantly, and the coffee cup in her hand almost fell to the ground. She left, reached out and touched his head, her eyes filled with grief. You didn't get angry, are you? Why don't I even recognize you? I am Ruhan, Su Ruhan, your fiancé. Fiancé? Lin Xiaochuan almost jumped up. He is a bachelor who has been a single for 28 years and has never even talked about his girlfriend. Where is his fiancé? He stared at Su Ruhan's delicate face, and suddenly a bunch of chaotic scenes flashed through his brain. He ate, took a walk with this woman, and even had scenes of his hand. These memories seemed to be thrusting into his brain, which really made him creepy. Are you kidding? He tried to ask, with a clear uncertainty in his voice. Su Ruhan's face became even more difficult to see. She put down her coffee cup and hugged her chest with her hands. Her words were disgusted. Lin Xiaochuan, what's going on with you? I was fine yesterday, but when I woke up today, I was disgusted with me. If you don't want to get married, just say, don't mess with these things. Lin Xiaochuan heard this and his brain became even more disturbed. Is he married? He even heard the name of this woman. How could he get married? He took a deep breath, tried to calm himself down by drawing, and then asked carefully, when did we know that? When did we know? Su Ruhan glared at him, as if he was thinking he was deliberately looking for trouble, but he still replied patiently, 3 years ago, at the company's New Year's meeting. You clumsily knocked over my wine glass, causing my skirt to get completely wet. Later, you chased me with a slutty face for half a year before I reluctantly agreed to try you. Don't you remember these? Lin Xiaochuan was stunned for a moment when he heard this. He had a certain impression, it seemed like this was true, but that was not his memory at all. He rubbed his son's hole and felt his head hurt even more. He began to wonder if he was crazy or that all this was a ridiculous dream. Ruhan, I may feel a little uncomfortable, my brain is a little chaotic. He reluctantly smiled and tried to calm down. You go to bed first, I'll calm myself. Su Ruhan looked at him, and there was a flash of suspicion in his eyes, but he finally pointed, then you have a break early, and there will be an important meeting tomorrow, don't stay too late. Before she turned around and said, if you feel really uncomfortable, go to the hospital for a look, don't be too stubborn. After closing, Lin Xiaochuan sat on the bed alone, feeling like he was thrown into a completely strange world. He began to search for the wires around, trying to figure out what was going on. There is an identity card on the bedside cabinet, with Lin Xiaochuan written on it, and the photo is also his face, but the position column reads Star Technology Executive Director. He almost threw the card out. When did he, a bottom-level programmer who wrote a code, become the executive director? He turned on the phone next to him again. The wallpaper on the screen was a photo of him and Su Ruhan, and the two of them smiled very sweetly. He slid open the screen and found that his phone was full of various work emails and meeting reminders, as well as some chat records with Su Ruhan, which made his face and heart beat. The more he looked at it, the more he felt unfavorable, and this was not his life at all. At this moment, the phone suddenly vibrated, and an unread message popped up on the screen. The sender was Professor Chen. Lin Xiaochuan's heart was thrilled. Professor Chen was his former instructor of the world, so why did he send him a message here? He clicked and found that the content was only a short sentence. Xiaochuan, if you see this news, it means you are still alive. Contact me immediately, it's urgent. Lin Xiaochuan stared at the news, his fingers trembling. He knew that all this might have something to do with Professor Chen's quantum travel experience. He remembered that Professor Chen once mentioned that this technology can allow people's consciousness to cross dimensions and enter the other self-body of the parallel world, but at that time he was just a science fiction joke, and it was not true at all. But now, he seems to have been really being rolled into such a ridiculous thing. He took a deep breath and tried to revive it, but the phone only sent a busy voice. He sent another message, Professor, what happened here? After posting, he held his phone, waited tightly for a response, and his brain became a group. After a few minutes, the phone finally shook again, and Professor Chen replied, Xiaochuan, you have indeed traveled through time. An unexpected experience was that your consciousness was sent to a parallel world, replacing the Lin Xiaochuan of that world. Now that I hear it well, you must keep your tune low, pretend to be suitable for that identity, and never expose yourself. I will try to get you back, but you have to fight for time. After reading this news, Lin Xiaochuan felt that the whole person seemed to be trapped. Parallel world? Alternative identity? This sounds like a story of some kind of cheap science fiction novel, but he is now really living in it. He gritted his teeth and replied, Professor, this is so crazy. Why am I pretending? I don't know what Lin Xiaochuan is doing here. Professor Chen quickly replied, I understand your confusion, but you don't have a choice. The Lin Xiaochuan in that world is highly similar to your genes. You will gradually receive some of his memories and emotions, which will help you adapt. But remember that quantum travel is limited at some time. If the deadline exceeds, your consciousness will be trapped there forever, and may even lead to the collapse of two worlds. I am repairing the equipment and fighting to pick you up within 72 hours. Lin Xiaochuan looked at the words 72 hours, and his heart seemed to be pressed down by a large stone. How could he, an ordinary person, pretend to be another completely unfamiliar self within 3 days without being discovered? Not to mention, he didn't understand the rules of this world, and when he showed his horse's feet, the consequences were unbelievable. Just as he was thinking about it, a knock on the door suddenly came outside the door, and Su Ruhan's voice sounded again, Xiaochuan, are you not sleeping yet? Zhang Yang just called the fair and told him that the meeting will change tomorrow and I want to confirm the details with you. When Lin Xiaochuan heard the name Zhang Yang far, a vague impression suddenly flashed in his brain, a man in an expensive dress, His eyes were so sharp that he could see through people, and there was always a discomfortable smile on the corners of his mouth. He didn't know why, but he just told him that this person was definitely not a good role to deal with. "I got it, I'll come right away," he responded with a stern face, then quickly put on the nightgown on the bed, trying to make himself look normal. He didn't know who Zhang Yangyuan was or what the meeting was, but he had to put it on, at least until he figured out the situation. He couldn't let anyone see the crack. When he walked to the living room, Su Ruhan was already sitting on the sofa, holding a tablet in his hand, looking through the information. She raised her head and looked at him, still with a slight suspicion in her eyes. "You're really okay, are you? Your face is still very bad." "It's okay, it's just that I haven't had a good sleep." Su Ruhan gave him the tablet, which was a meeting schedule, and the title reads Star Technology Quarterly Battle Strategic Planning. She pointed to one of them. He said the investor had doubts about the new project this time and might adjust the budget at a time. "As the executive director, you have to prepare the right plan and don't let him catch the handle." Lin Xiaochuan heard a fog, and he didn't know what new projects and investors were doing. But he could only point his head in a slight way. "Well, I'll handle it." Su Ruhan looked at him, and there was a complex emotion in his eyes, as if he wanted to say something, but in the end he still held it back. She stood up and patted his shoulder. "Then you have a break early, I'll go to bed first. I'll be very busy tomorrow, so don't make yourself too tired." Looking at her leaving behind, Lin Xiaochuan felt a little confused. He knew that this woman was important to Lin Xiaochuan, but to him, she was just a stranger. "But I don't know why." Looking at her back, he felt a throbbing in his heart, as if there was really some emotion surrounding him. He slammed his head, threw away these miserable ideas, and then lowered his head to start studying the information on the tablet. He must figure out the life and work of this Lin Xiaochuan as soon as possible, otherwise he may not be able to save himself tomorrow in 72 hours. The night is getting deeper and deeper, and the city lights outside the window are still bright. Lin Xiaochuan sat on the sand, holding a tablet in his hand, and there was a mess in his brain. He knew that he was being rolled into a far beyond imagination, and all of this just began. Lin Xiaochuan rubbed his sore eyes. The living room bell was already pointing at 3 o'clock in the morning. The city lights outside the window were sparse, and only a few high-rise buildings were still shining alone. The tablet screen in his hand was filled with information from Star Technology, and the dense data and project reports made him dizzy. This Lin Xiaochuan is really not a simple role. Under the leadership of the executive director, there are a lot of responsibilities that make people stand out: new project development, investment communication, internal team management. Each one is like a mountain pressing on his shoulders. He is a code-writing farm. How can he understand these high-end things? But he couldn't show his fear, so he could only write down one by one and try to grab the thread. He leaned against the sofa and suddenly flashed Professor Chen's news in his brain: a 72-hour time limit. This made his heart feel like a block was pressed, heavy. He didn't know if Professor Chen could really get him back within 3 days, nor did he know if he could get to that time in this strange world. Su Ruhan's face appeared in his brain again. Her eyes were filled with worry and trust, which made his heart full of sensation. He knew that he was not like this, but those strange memories and emotions were like vines, slowly surround him, giving him a sense of being unable to tell the difference between reality. "No, you can't think about it," he murmured in a low voice, patted his face, and tried to make himself sober. He picked up the tablet, continued to look through the information, and tried to find more information about Zhang Yangyuan. As soon as this name appears, it gives him a bad premonition, such as if he knows that this guy is not easy to mess with. Sure enough, in several meeting records, he saw Zhang Yangyuan's name. The position is the Vice President of Star Technology, responsible for market and external cooperation. The record mentioned that this guy recently had a microcosm on the budget allocation of the new project Quantum Core and repeatedly sang a reversal with Lin Xiaochuan at the meeting. Quantum Core? Lin Xiaochuan felt a sudden slap in his heart when he saw this. This name sounds a little related to Professor Chen's experience. Is it hard to say that Star Technology in this world is also studying similar technologies? The more he thought about it, the more he felt that he was not in a match. He continued to look down and found that this project was company secret, and only a few high levels could access specific content, and Lin Xiaochuan was one of the responsible persons of the project. Just as he was immersed in the data, his phone suddenly vibrated, and a new message popped up on the screen, which was still posted by Professor Lin Xiaochuan. Don't try to touch the quantum technology of this world. Any interference may lead to irrepredictable consequences. Keep it low and wait for my signal. Lin Xiaochuan looked at the news and his eyebrows became tighter. Professor Chen said this easily, but his current identity is one of the responsible persons of the project. How can it be possible to not contact him? What's more, Zhang Yangyuan's guy clearly seemed to have an enemy for him. Whenever he was caught, he even had a problem with self-protection. Just as he was about to reply to the message, the screen of his mobile phone suddenly became dark, and then a rushing sound broke the silence of the late night. Lin Xiaochuan felt nervous, quickly stuffed his cell phone into his pocket, stood up and walked to the door. Through the cat's eyes, he saw Su Ruhan standing outside the door, wearing a nightgown, with a slightly white face. "Xiaochuan, are you not sleeping yet?" She pushed the door open, with a burst of fatigue in her voice. "I just had a nightmare dream. I dreamed that something happened to you. I always felt uneasy." Lin Xiaochuan looked at the worry in her eyes and felt a soft heart. He knew that he should not have feelings for anyone in this world, but Su Ruhan's concern made him feel warm that he could not say. He smiled reluctantly and said lightly, "It's okay, I just read the information a little late. Don't worry, go back to bed." Su Ruhan stood there and looked at him, with a flash of silence in his eyes. "Xiaochuan, you are really strange lately. In the past, you never stayed up late until this point, nor would you be like now, absent-minded. Are you having something to blame me?" Lin Xiaochuan was surprised, and on the surface he was determined. "There is nothing, it's because the work pressure is high and the brain is a bit chaotic. You also know that there are many things in the company recently, and there will be meetings tomorrow, so I have to prepare well." Su Ruhan was silent for a few seconds, as if she wanted to see something from his face, but in the end she was still a little bit, "Okay, don't be too tired. I just hope you can tell me that no matter what happens, I'm always by your side." After saying that, she turned back to the room, leaving a lonely back. Lin Xiaochuan looked at the door close to him and felt like something was being pulled hard in his heart. He knew that Su Ruhan was really concerned about Lin Xiaochuan, but he was not that person. He clenched his fists, forced himself to suppress these emotions, and then returned to the sand and continued to study the data. When it was getting bright, he finally closed his tablet, closed his eyes and leaned against the sand, his brain full of miscellaneous thoughts. At 7 o'clock in the morning, the mobile phone was about to start, and Lin Xiaochuan suddenly woke up and found that he was asleep on the sand. He rubbed his stiff neck, got up to wash, and tried to make himself look energetic. Today is a big day. At the quarterly meeting of Star Technology, he has to face Zhang Yangyuan and a bunch of unrecognizable high levels, and not reveal any trace. Su Ruhan had already prepared breakfast, and the two of them sat at the dining table, and the atmosphere was a little silent. She lowered her head and drank coffee, occasionally looking up at him, still hiding her worries in her eyes. Lin Xiaochuan broke the silence with his head on his head. "Ruhan, the meeting may be late today. I will talk to you again when I come back." She clicked her head and said lightly, "Okay, be careful. That person from Zhangyan. Be more careful. He seems to be doing tricks behind his back recently." Lin Xiaochuan felt a little nervous and said, "I understand, I will be careful." He said that he was not sure. What exactly does Zhang Yangyuan want to fuck? He is an outsider who can't even understand the basic internal relationships of the company. Why is he fighting with this old fox? After breakfast, he changed into a straight suit and followed himself in the mirror and reluctantly adjusted his confident expression. Su Ruhan sent him to the door, gave him a briefcase, and said in a low voice, "Come on, I believe in you." Her smile was warm and really folded, which made Lin Xiaochuan feel palpitations again. He clicked the head, turned down the building, and took the luxury car in the car, and the driver was already waiting for him. The headquarters building of Star Technology is located in the center of the city, with a cold light shining under the sun. When Lin Xiaochuan walked into the main hall, the staff coming towards him asked him, calling him President Lin. He responded with a stern and a slight urge in his heart. The elevator went straight to the top meeting room. When he pushed the door in, there were already people sitting inside. Zhang Yangyuan was sitting next to the main seat, wearing a dark suit, and a meaningful smile was hanging on the corner of his mouth. President Lin, it's quite early. Zhang Yang stood up, stretched out his hand, and tried to try it out. How did you get off last night? I heard that you have been under a lot of pressure recently, so don't destroy your body. Lin Xiaochuan held his hand and felt that the other party's strength was a bit too much, as if he was deliberately trying his reaction. He smiled reluctantly and said calmly, "Thank you for your concern, I'm fine. Today's meeting is very important, let's take the time." Zhang Yangyuan raised his eyebrows and said nothing, but there was a flash of fun in his eyes. After Lin Xiaochuan sat down, the meeting officially began, and the content of the discussion was about the progress of the quantum core project and budget allocation. He could only harden the water from the data on the tablet, and sometimes he could echo and put on a confident look. However, Zhang Yangyuan obviously did not intend to make him feel better. When discussing the budget issue, he suddenly spoke, saying a singular saying, "President Lin, the funding investment in this project has exceeded 30% of the original plan, but the progress report has been vague. I heard that you have recently adjusted the core technology of the project, but the specific content has not been reported to the board. What's going on?" The atmosphere in the conference room suddenly became tight, and everyone's eyes were focused on Lin Xiaochuan. His heart sank, knowing that Zhang Yang was deliberately looking for trouble, but he had no idea about the specific content of the quantum core. How should he answer? Some vague memory fragments suddenly flashed in the brain, like the shadows left by the Lin Xiaochuan in this world. He opened his mouth with his head. "General Zhang, technical adjustments are for optimizing stability. I will submit a complete report on the specific data before the next meeting. I have been communicating with the investor for the overspending part of the fund and will soon be a result." Zhang Yang narrowed his eyes as if he had never expected that he would be so fast. He sneered, with a mockery in his voice, "President Lin really has a foundation. I hope you can say it. After all, this project is the fate of the company. If there is a mistake, it is not something you can afford." Lin Xiaochuan looked down on the surface, but his heart was overturned. He knew that Zhang Chang was not so simple on the surface, and there must be a bigger calculation behind it. After the meeting ended, he was about to leave. Zhang Yang took the initiative to leave and said in a low voice, "President Lin, there is a private gathering tonight. They are all friends in the circle. Do you want to go relax together?" Lin Xiaochuan instinctively wanted to refuse, but looking at Zhang Yang's two sharp eyes, he knew that this was not a simple invitation, but a certain kind of trial. He smiled reluctantly. "Okay, time and place will be sent to me, I will pass." Zhang Yang was a little bit and patted his shoulder. "Then let's just say it, don't let the brothers down." After speaking, he turned away, leaving a meaningful back. Lin Xiaochuan returned to the office and sat on the chair after closing the door. He knew that he was getting into greater trouble step by step, but he had no choice but to walk on his head. The phone suddenly vibrated, and Professor Chen's news came again. "Xichuan, the equipment repair is not progressing smoothly, and the time may be delayed. You must protect yourself and not fall into any disputes in this world." Lin Xiaochuan looked at the news and smiled bitterly. Protect yourself? It's too late, he's already rolled into the storm center. Zhang Yangyuan's trial, Su Ruhan's concern, and the mysterious quantum core project, everything was like a rope, tightly strangling his neck. He took a deep breath and replied, "Professor, I will do as much as possible. But you have to be quick, I don't know how long I can last." After a quick afternoon, Lin Xiaochuan looked through more information about quantum core in his office and found that this project actually has some connection with quantum travel, and may even involve ideology transmission technology. The more he looked at it, the more shocked he became. He wondered that Lin Xiaochuan in this world might have known something for a long time, and even participated in the development of technology. But he didn't have time to think about it because the invitation to the gathering from Chanyang had arrived. It was a high-rise building in the city center, and it was 8 o'clock in the evening. He knew that this gathering was definitely not simple, but it would be impossible not to go. He must figure out what Zhang Yanyuan wanted to fuck, otherwise he would be the only one who was beaten. At 7:30 p.m., he changed into a casual suit and drove to the club. The night view outside the car window was full of brilliance, but his heart felt like a big rock was pressing down, so heavy that he couldn't breathe. There were already people sitting in the reserved hall of the club. Zhang Yang sat in the main seat. When he saw him coming in, he stood up enthusiastically. "Mr. Lin, it's just right, everyone is waiting for you." He smiled and introduced several so-called friends in the circle, most of whom were in the technology industry, and everyone looked at him with a few points. Lin Xiaochuan sat down with his head hard, and responded to various greetings, always keeping alert. After 3 rounds of drinking, Zhang Yangyuan suddenly picked up the wine glass and said with a smile, "President Lin, I recently heard that Xingqian Technology's quantum core has made a new breakthrough. The brothers are very curious. Can you give me some inside information?" Lin Xiaochuan felt nervous and knew the truth was coming. He picked up the wine glass, shook it lightly, and said calmly, "General Zhang, you know the project more clearly than me. How can the inside story be so easy to say? Besides, tonight is a relaxing time, let's stop talking about work." Zhang Yangqiu was disappointed in his eyes, but he quickly covered up and laughed. "President Lin said right, come and drink." It looked gentle on the surface, but Lin Xiaochuan knew that this guy would never stop there. Sure enough, in the next time, Zhang Yanyuan tried several tricks and even mentioned some private matters that only Lin Xiaochuan knew, as if he was deliberately trying his reaction. Lin Xiaochuan should be careful and reluctantly supported by the memory clips left in his brain, but the pressure in his heart became stronger and stronger. He knew that Zhang Chang had begun to doubt his identity, and there would be only more trouble next. It was getting deeper, and when the party was over, Zhang Yanyuan patted his shoulder and said in a low voice, "President Lin, I have a lot of chat tonight and I will contact you more in the future. Oh, by the way, I heard some voices recently, saying that some people in the company are not satisfied with your decision, so you have to be careful." Lin Xiaochuan looked down on the surface and sneered in his heart. The threat of this guy was already obvious, but he had no choice but to calm down the situation first. When he left the meeting, the night wind blew over and he felt all over his body exhausted. He knew that the game had just begun, and he had to find a breakthrough to find a line of life between the two worlds. When he got home, Su Ruhan was not sleeping yet and sat in the living room waiting for him. Seeing him enter the door, she stood up and asked lightly, "What's the matter? Is it okay?" Her concern warmed Lin Xiaochuan's heart, but he could only shake his head and said, "It's okay, it's just a little tired. You can rest early." Su Ruhan looked at him, but he stopped talking, but finally he clicked a little and went back to the room. Lin Xiaochuan sat on the sand, his brains full of today's species. He knew that Zhang Chang's threat, Professor Chen's delay, and Su Ruhan's emotions were forcing him to make choices. But what could he choose? He was just a passerby who missed this world and had to take responsibility that was not his. The night became darker, and the city outside the window was gradually calming down. Lin Xiaochuan closed his eyes and tried to relax himself, but the pressure in his heart was like a net, and the tighter it became. He knew that every step next was of great importance, and he must find his way out in this crisis. Lin Xiaochuan sat on the sand, and the night in the city outside the window was completely silent, with only a few scattered road lights still stubbornly lit. He rubbed his son's hole, and his brain was like a group of numbness. Zhang Yang's threat, Su Ruhan's concern, Professor Chen's unreachable rescue, everything was like a stone pressing on his heart. He knew that he could not be moved like this anymore, and he had to take the initiative to find a solution. Otherwise, he might not be able to save his life even in this world. He picked up his phone, but there was still no new news about Professor Chen on the screen. He gritted his teeth and decided not to wait any longer. He sent a message, "Professor, I can't be moved to wait anymore. Zhang Chang has already begun to doubt me. The company's core quantum projects may be related to time travel technology, so I must find out clearly. If you have any progress there, tell me." After the release, he threw his phone around, stood up and walked to the window, looked at the night outside, and made up his mind. No matter whether Professor Chen could respond in time, he had to think of a way himself. The next morning, Lin Xiaochuan got up earlier than usual. Su Ruhan was still sleeping. He didn't wake her up. After washing up, he changed into a suit and went straight to Xinchen Technology headquarters with his briefcase. He knew that today we must find more threads about the Quantum Core project, which not only concerns his identity secret, but also the way home. When he arrived at the company, he went directly to his office, and after checking the door, he began to search for documents on the table and information on his computer. As the executive supervisor, the Lin Xiaochuan in this world has very high authority and many confidential documents are stored on the computer. He opened at one point and finally found a report called Quantum Core Identity Mapping in an encrypted folder. A technique is recorded in detail in the report that dataizes conscious mind through quantum symbiosis and then projects into a similar individual of another dimension. Although the words are obscure, Lin Xiaochuan could see at a glance that this is almost exactly the same as Professor Chen's quantum travel technology. His heart beat faster, his fingers trembled in sliding the mouse tag, and continued to look down. The report mentioned that this technology is still in the experimental stage, and the biggest problem is the stability after conscious projection. If the projection time is too long, the conscious will irreversibly merge with the host body, and may even lead to the collapse of the balance of the two dimensions. What surprised him even more was that the final signature of the report was Lin Xiaochuan, which means that the world's self not only participated in the research and development of this technology, but may even be the core promoter. How is this possible? Lin Xiaochuan muttered in a low voice, and some blurry memory fragments suddenly flashed in his brain: the white light in the experiment room, the curves that jumped on the data screen, and the scene of himself and a few people in white coats. These memories are not his, but they really make him creepy. He suddenly closed his computer and leaned against the back of the chair, feeling that all the energy in his body was exhausted. At this moment, the office door was knocked, and the assistant's voice came from outside. "President Lin, President Zhang just called and said that there was an urgent matter to see you. Now he is waiting in the meeting room." Lin Xiaochuan's heart sank, knowing that this was not a good thing, but he couldn't hide, so he could only respond with a stern voice: "I understand, I'll go there right away." In the meeting room, Zhang Yangyuan was sitting next to the main seat, holding a cup of coffee in his hand. Seeing him come in, and a smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. "President Lin, I'm sorry for the aggravation of you, but I just received the news that the investor was not satisfied with the progress of the Quantum Core project and planned to terminate the cooperation in advance. I think this matter needs to be discussed with you. After all, you are the project responsible." Lin Xiaochuan sat down, calm on the surface, and his heart was overturned. He knew that Zhang Chang was forcing him, and the investor's affairs were probably a cover, and his real purpose was to try to find out his control over the project. He took a deep breath and tried to calm down the situation. "General Zhang, I will communicate with the investor in this matter, and I will submit the progress report as soon as possible. Don't worry, there will be no problem with the project." Zhang Yangyuan raised his eyebrows and had a flash of fun in his eyes. "It is a good thing that Lin has confidence, but I heard that you have made some adjustments to the core data of the project recently, and the board of directors has not notified it. If the investor knows this, it cannot be solved with a no problem net." His lingering was full of picking, as if he was deliberately forcing Lin Xiaochuan to reveal his brink of the crack. Lin Xiaochuan felt nervous, but he didn't show it on his face. He responded with the memory left in his brain: "Data adjustment is to improve stability. I will explain the specific situation in the report. If Zhang has any opinions on the project, I can directly mention it, and I will consider it." He said it was clear, and on the surface he looked confident, but he was so nervous. Zhang Yangyuan stared at him for a few seconds, finally withdrew his gaze and smiled. Okay, since President Lin said this, I will wait and see. But I would like to remind you, the quantum core is not a small project. Once there is a problem, you and I can't afford this responsibility. After speaking, he stood up, patted Lin Xiaochuan on the shoulder, and turned away from the meeting room. Lin Xiaochuan looked at his back and clenched his fists. He knew that Zhang Chang would never stop here, and there would be more trouble next time. After returning to the office, he immediately sent a message to Professor Chen, briefly explained the content of the report he had just seen, and asked, Professor, what is the relationship between quantum technology in this world and your experience? I must know the truth, otherwise I will not be right. After the news came out, he sat in a chair, waiting anxiously for a response. After a few minutes, the phone finally shook, and Professor Chen replied, Xiaochuan, I didn't expect that things would be so complicated. The core quantum project of this world may be a branch of our technology. When the experiment failed, data might leak to the parallel world. I was repairing the equipment and it was expected to be completed in 24 hours. But don't interfere with their technology, any modification may cause the collapse of two worlds. Lin Xiaochuan looked at the news and felt a little confused. It didn't sound like a century in 24 hours. He knew that he had to calm down at the last time, and at the same time he had to force Zhang Yangyuan step by step. What made him even more painful was that Su Ruhan's existence. He became increasingly confused about his feelings for her in his heart, but he knew that he was not a world, and any retention was a harm to both people. When she got home in the evening, Su Ruhan had prepared the dishes, and there were several simple and warm home-cooked dishes on the table. She saw him enter the door and greeted him with a smile. What's going on today? You don't look good, so you stay up late again? Her voice was filled with concern, which made Lin Xiaochuan feel warm, but what came with him was deeper guilt. It's good, I'm just a little tired. He smiled reluctantly, sat at the table, lowered his head to eat, and tried to cover up his feelings. Su Ruhan sat opposite him, staring at him calmly, and after a while, he suddenly opened his mouth. Xiaochuan, I know you have been under great pressure recently, but can you tell me what happened? I always think you are hiding what you are. Lin Xiaochuan put the chopsticks in his hand, looked up at her, and a flash of prick in his eyes. He wanted to tell her everything, but he couldn't, not only because of the secret of quantum travel, but also because he knew that once he said it, he would never be able to go back. He took a deep breath and said lightly, Ruhan, it's really nothing, it's just a job. Don't think too much, I'll handle it. Su Ruhan looked at him with disappointment, but she didn't ask anymore, just lowered her head and continued to eat. The atmosphere on the table became a little heavy, and Lin Xiaochuan felt like a big rock was pressing down on his heart, so heavy that he couldn't breathe. He knew that his confusion about her had hurt her, but he had no choice. After eating, Su Ruhan went to wash dishes. Lin Xiaochuan was sitting in the living room. His mobile phone suddenly shook. It was Professor Chen's news. Xiaochuan, the equipment repair has been completed and the preparation is ready. At 1 a.m. tonight, I will start the retransmission of the consciousness. You must find a peaceful place to ensure that you are not beaten. Remember, this is the last chance. If you miss it, you will never go back. Lin Xiaochuan's heart beat faster as he looked at the news. He knew that this moment finally came, but there was a complex emotion in his heart that could not be described. Returning to the original world means giving up everything here, including Su Ruhan. He held the phone, his brain full of her smile, her concern, and the warmth that was not in his memory. He stood up, walked to the kitchen door, and looked at Su Ruhan's busy back, and suddenly a sudden urge in his heart. He wanted to tell her the truth and wanted to ask her. If he knew that he was not the real Lin Xiaochuan, would he still accept him? But when he reached his mouth, he swallowed it back and could only whisper, Ruhan, I have something to do tonight and may have to go out. You can rest early, don't wait for me. Su Ruhan turned over and looked at him, with a flash of confusion in his eyes, but in the end he was still a little bit, okay, be careful. Her voice was very light, which made Lin Xiaochuan even more uncomfortable. He turned away from his home, drove to a remote park, found an indifferent corner to sit down, and quietly waited for the arrival of the early morning. As time passed, the night became deeper and deeper, and there were only sounds of croakers and occasional sounds in the park. Lin Xiaochuan looked at the time on his phone, and his heart was both tight and confused. He knew that once the retelling of consciousness began, he would never see Su Ruhan again, but he knew that he had to go back not only for himself, but also for the balance of the two worlds. Just 5 minutes before a slight morning, the phone suddenly started to rise. It was a strange number. Lin Xiaochuan sniffed at Naruto, picked up the phone, and heard Zhang Yangyuan's voice. "President Lin, are you still busy outside this evening? I just received the news that the experiment data of the quantum core has been leaked, and the board of directors is now on an urgent investigation. Should you give it an explanation?" Lin Xiaochuan was shocked and his brain quickly turned. He knew that this must be another trial by Zhang Chang, or even a game he deliberately set up. He replied coldly, "General Zhang, I will investigate the data leaks clearly, but now it is private time. If you have anything to say, I will talk about it tomorrow." After speaking, he directly called the phone and turned off his phone to ensure that he would not be beaten again. At 1 o'clock in the morning, Professor Chen's news came at a certain time. "Xichuan, prepare well, and the replies of consciousness are about to begin. Close your eyes, relax your mind, and don't resist." Lin Xiaochuan took a deep breath, leaned on the park chair, closed his eyes, and his brain was covered with Su Ruhan's faces. He knew that this was the last chance, but in a corner of his heart, he was shouting to let him stay. Suddenly, a dazzling blue light flashed through him, and he felt his consciousness as if he was torn and his whole person seemed to have fallen into a bottomless purity. Professor Chen's voice came from his ears and continued, "Xichuan, hold on, it's almost done." He gritted his teeth and tried to calm himself, but the memory in his brain was like a flood, with his overtime work day in the world, and with the points in this world with Su Ruhan. The two memories were intertwined, making him almost unable to tell who he was. Just as he realized that he was about to leave completely, he suddenly heard a familiar voice coming from a distance. "Xichuan," was Su Ruhan's voice, with anxiety and panic. He suddenly opened his eyes and found that he was still in the park, and his rebirth seemed to be interrupted. Su Ruhan stood far away, holding his cell phone in his hand, and his face was filled with purgation. "I don't know what you were fucking, but I know, you are not the real Xiaochuan, right?" Lin Xiaochuan was stunned, and his heart seemed to be struck by lightning. He didn't expect Su Ruhan to find this, let alone she had noticed his abnormality long ago. He opened his mouth and wanted to explain it, but he couldn't say anything at all. Su Ruhan walked over and squatted in front of him, his voice trembling. "I don't care who you are. I only know that you were very good to me during this period of time. I don't want you to leave, no matter who you are." Her words were like a knife, stabbing into Lin Xiaochuan's heart. He knew that he had to make a choice, to continue to return to the original world, or stay and bear all the consequences. He looked at the phone with his head down, and the news about Professor Chen was still flashing. "Xichuan, the window period is only 3 minutes, and there is no chance if it is wrong." As time passed, Lin Xiaochuan's heart seemed to be torn into 2.5. Finally, he gritted his teeth tightly, raised his head and looked at Su Ruhan, and said lightly, "Ruhan, I'm sorry, I must leave. But I will remember you forever." After saying that, he closed his eyes, relaxed his mind again, and let his mind be swallowed by the blue light. The sounds around his ears gradually disappeared, and he felt like he was hanging in the air. All his memories and emotions were wiped out. When he opened his eyes again, he was already lying in the familiar laboratory. Professor Chen's old face was looking at him anxiously. "Xichuan, you are back. Thank you, I almost missed the window period." Lin Xiaochuan sat up, and his brain was still in a mess. He looked down at his hands, familiar and unfamiliar, as if he had been a long dream. He knew that he had finally returned to his original world, but his heart was filled with silence, as if he had lost something important. Professor Chen patted his shoulder, and felt guilty in his language. "Xichuan, I am a mistake this time, which has caused you to live with so much. But don't worry, I have lost data, and quantum time travel technology will not start again." Lin Xiaochuan pointed a little, but didn't say anything, just looked at the equipment in the experiment room quietly, and his brain was full of Su Ruhan's last purgation. A few days later, Lin Xiaochuan returned to his small rental house, and his life seemed to have returned to normal. He was still the farm that worked overtime until he vomited blood, and his life was still unchanged, but there was always a corner in his heart, as if he could never fill it up again. He would occasionally flip his phone to look at the blank chat records, then smiled bitterly and turned off the screen. One night, he worked overtime until late at night, dragged his tired body back home, and found that there was an unfamiliar envelope on the table. There is no signature on the envelope, only a few simple words, to Lin Xiaochuan. He glanced at his eyebrows and opened it. There was a photo inside. The photo was a photo of him and Su Ruhan, and the background was the night view of the city in the parallel world. A line of small words is written on the back of the photo: "No matter where you are, I will find you." Lin Xiaochuan looked at the lines of words, his fingers trembled slightly. He knew that this could not be a coincidence. The danger of quantum travel seems to have not ended yet, and his connection with that world will never break. He put away the photo, walked to the window, looked at the night outside, and felt a sense of unclear feelings in his heart. The road ahead is still very long, and all of this just begins.